Dana,
Hello?
how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Great. Well, just trying to put my camera in a good place so it doesn't fall. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you today?
Awesome. Well, like today is, Easter, so happy Easter Day.
Yeah, it is Easter, isn't it? Yes,
So-
thank you. Happy Easter to you too.
Yeah. So, well, Sarah, glad to have you here, and I have like a little bit confusion with like time zone. So I kind of started before. Actually, I thought it was I thought I was like 1 hour behind, but I'm one hour ahead from you, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it seems like you're 1 hour ahead. I thought you were an hour behind too.
Yeah. Well, but
Our mistake.
yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, so Sarah, I would like let's get started now. Just by telling us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, so I teach English online. I've been teaching for about 5 years now, online mostly. And I focus on helping students improve their conversational English. So I focus on teaching idioms, phrasal verbs, and expressions.
Yeah.
So this conversational English that you don't always learn in school, but it's really important to know for wherever you go, whenever you want to communicate in speaking.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah.
That's really my focus.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, now that you're mentioning, kind of a little bit about the speaking part. So, many of my students, for example, sometimes they ask me like, what's the best way? I mean, because for example, sometimes they tell me, well, we can see this, like for example, when we are like babies, like our parents, our family, they start just to talk to us like in our mother tongue, so they don't give us books like for learning a language. They just talk to us, we're babies and that's the way we learn it. So sometimes, people is a little bit confused with that because and so many kind of, let's talk about like kind of like the traditional way, like for example, when people want to learn a new language, they go to an institute and they are just giving, books and, a lot of exercises. I mean, that's kind of good. I mean, I think that's kind of basic, but I think like, for example, the speaking part and like trying to help the people and encourage the people to speak, I think that's kind of a better way, right?
Yeah, that's so important. Speaking doesn't always happen in the classroom because there's a whole group of students, and students usually practice with each other. They don't always get the direct feedback from a teacher like you can online when you're working in an online program. And and in school, a lot of times there's still a lot of this grammar translation being used, and I don't want to get too philosophical into like teacher methods of teaching and stuff, but my approach, I really believe in learning phrases and expressions that are commonly used more so than focusing on
I mean, that's
only grammar, only vocabulary.
Yeah. I mean, like I've been watching as well some of the videos that you have on Instagram on your page, and like for example, you just like go with specific kind of expression and specific phrases that people can use. I mean, that's pretty awesome. I really like it. I mean, I like your videos. I'm a fan.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just found that that's what my students want, and I wrote my thesis paper for my degree on this topic as well. So I've done lots of research and I've created a lot of curriculum for helping students really improve their conversational English. It's a different style of learning than our traditional style.
Yeah, and like I was watching as well another of your live videos, and you were saying like you were like kind of learning Portuguese, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to. I know some words and some phrases, but I'm very beginner. So
Yeah.
If I hear someone, I might understand like 10%.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I'm asking you this because like for example, now that you're like kind of in the same position of a student, like a learner, like I don't know, what can you see since that point of view? I mean, for example, when we teach English, is maybe another point of view, and we try to help our students to try to understand and try to make them talk and just maybe have like kind of having an encouraging class, like a motivational class, so people like try to speak. So like for example, now in your position, like you're now a student like learning Portuguese, do you see like something different? Maybe you feel, I don't know, in another way?
Well, yeah, I love learning Portuguese the way that I teach English. So
awesome.
I'll commonly ask my students, like if I'm teaching an expression, I'll say, what is this in Portuguese? But I teach mostly intermediate level students. So even though they tell me the expression, it's still very new and difficult to me because I need to first focus on just basic vocabulary and very basic phrases and expressions and pronunciation. So, I ask just to know, but I also look at language differently than a lot of learners maybe because I have studied language for a long time and I understand, how sentence structure works and all of that. So, it's exciting. What languages do you know?
Well, my mother tongue is Spanish, so hablo muy bien el español. I don't know if you speak Spanish.
No, but I understand a little. It's a little similar to Portuguese.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit similar. Actually, as I have like some of my students. I mean, like, well, actually, right now in this moment, I have like 2 students from Brazil, and so sometimes it's a little bit kind of. They try to speak with me like in Portuguese, and I barely understand a little bit because like some words in Portuguese and Spanish are kind of similar. Not all, of course, but some of them they are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And well, another thing is that, for example, okay, so sorry, I didn't remember. Like you said, like you've been teaching like for how long?
I've been teaching online for the last 5 years, and before that, I taught in Korea, and then I taught at a university for a while. But now at this point, I've taught online for longer than I've taught in the traditional classroom.
Yeah.
So I'm an online.
So what did you decide to? I mean, did you study like English teaching, like the career, or like why did you decide like to become a teacher? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I have my master's in TESOL, teaching English as a second language. So it started, when I was an undergrad student. I studied abroad in Italy, and I traveled a lot, and I love language and I love culture. And I was like, what can I do? So I'm always meeting people from all over the world and learning all these different languages. And so, I realized, teaching English is the best way. So I went to school for that.
Is there a difference? Because, for example, you were saying like you were teaching in the university and in other places in the past, right? So now you're like you're teaching online. So there is kind of it's different, like teaching in a university, for example, and teaching the way that you're doing it right now.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Like, I mean, you were teaching in a university in the past, right? I mean, you're still teaching in a university?
No. I teach for myself now. I only have my students, yeah.
Yeah, so my question is like, kind of like the methodology, like the way you taught when you were in the university is different than the way you're doing it now, right?
Yes. I found, I did a lot of research for years, and, wrote my whole paper on the approach and this teaching style that I do now. And I found whenever I worked at a school or university or in public system, I had to follow their rules of,
exactly.
Preparing students for tests. And I know that's important. We have to go to college. We have to get good grades.
Yeah.
But I found, preparing for the test is often very different than preparing for real life. open, actual conversation.
Well,
So,
yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I mean, that's a very important point that you're saying right now, because, like many people, like when they go to like, let's call it the traditional system, I mean, because they have to, you have but when they go there, I mean, that's a very important point that you're saying, like, it's very different. I mean, real life is very different. Like, for example, most of English learners, like, I think, I could say, like, most of my students, like, for example, most of my students, they've been already in an academy, in an English academy, in an English school already. But the point that, for example, they know how to read, they are very good at reading. Yeah. They know how to write, they are very good at writing. But it comes, like, to speak, they struggle. I mean, I don't know how can I say this, but I think it's very important to put into practice and all. I mean, it's kind of basics. I mean, it's okay if you go to a kind of a school and learn, I mean, basic stuff like structures, how to make a sentence. But I think it's more important if you just try to just put it into practice, that knowledge. So you just have like the opportunity to talk like with people and just use your English.
And I think another big problem students have is that in class, in the traditional classroom, they don't have a lot of time to teach us all these phrases and expressions and idioms because they're preparing you with the vocabulary and the grammar structure and all that to prepare you for the test. So I think it's interesting because we use, in speaking, 80 to 90% of what we say is either an idiom or phrase or an expression. And phrasal verbs are so difficult. And I was just kind of had a conversation like a couple weeks ago with someone who is preparing students for the IELTS, and he was telling them, don't focus on idioms because they're not natural. Focus on phrasal verbs. And I was like, no, don't say that. Like, that's for the test, yes, but idioms are so natural. Like, you have to know them, So
I think part of the real English. Yeah, because I mean, like the point, like many people they just come here and like, hey, like even for example, this situation has happened to me. Like, sometimes I hang out and like, for example, I'm living in Colombia right now. Do you know Colombia by the way? No, right?
I have like one or two students in my course that are from Colombia, so
that's awesome.
I've never been, but I'm starting to learn a little bit about it.
Yeah, you should ask them about like salsa lessons. I mean, they can teach you some.
Oh, cool! Ooh, that'd be fun. I've never done salsa.
So I was telling you, like for example, like sometimes I hang out around like some like commercial centers or like shopping malls over here, like maybe I just go to the downtown sometimes with my students, and like sometimes people just sometimes approach and like they I mean I ask them like, hey, do you speak English? And they're like, yes. I mean, so I tried to speak English with them, and they don't. I mean, they were like, oh, I'm sorry, I took some lessons in English school, but I can't speak it. So I think it's that, like real life is different. I mean, real life is different. Like for example, you were saying like, expressions like idioms and like very common expressions. I mean, like that's the way, like even like, how can I say, even more like for example, teenagers, young people nowadays, they are coming out with new words. I mean, we have to learn those, common expressions so we can have a better communication with each other. So I think that's a very important point about it. And
definitely.
Yeah. So like for example, so you're teaching like online lessons right now, and that's pretty awesome. And as I told you, I've been just watching these. Well, I'm kind of fan of them. And another thing is like for example about teaching. Like for example, when you teach, you have different students, right? So I mean, like for example, something that I really believe is like each student is different. So. Because some students, like they have like, I don't know how I can explain this. They have like that sparkle. They are like boom, and some others they struggle more than others. So, for example, how do you deal with those situations? Like when a student maybe doesn't like really get it that well. So, what do you do in those occasions?
Well, I think you're right. Every student learns a little differently. Every student has a little different past with their learning experience. So if I'm helping a student who's already learned or knows 2 or 3 languages, it's easier to explain things, I found, because they understand that word structure, sentence structure. It doesn't always translate directly into their language.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I'm working with a student who has never studied a language at all, a lot of times they want to just translate, like word for word, every single thing. And
Yeah.
it's so hard, to understand that, it doesn't work like that. We have to move the words in the sentence, and this idiom doesn't exist in your language, but it does in English, or vice versa,
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's just kind of working with different students and seeing different styles and different levels, like the beginner level students I have, we pretty much just focus on vocabulary and pronunciation. And then with my more advanced students, I can explain in detail certain grammar points sometimes, or just phrases that maybe don't translate into their language. So
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just different styles, and the more you teach, the more you start to learn about different types of learning styles from students. So
Yeah. So like another kind of like maybe an important point is first of all we have to know students, they are different. They have different interests. They like different things, and sometimes, for example, I don't know, I think something cool is to make the class cool. Most of them actually, when some people they try to learn English, something, I don't know if this happened to you. For example, I was working as well and in kind of a private school in the past, and academies in the past. And for example, their parents send their kids to study. It's they send them there it's mandatory. And so some of them, they don't want to study. They don't want to. And something that I really like about what I'm doing right now is private lessons and online classes and when they come here as well and study. Is for example, people who comes is people who's really interested in learning, which is something important.
Yeah, definitely.
And another thing is for example, how can I for example, sometimes I do the classes, I really try to know them, what they like, so I can talk about something that they really like, and the class becomes, motivational for them, and they want to speak, and they want to just to communicate things, and they just ask me vocabulary, I just help them with that, and they just continue making up the conversation, which is awesome. Another question, for you, Sarah, is do you think, for example, teachers play an important role? Because, for example, many students, they go to some, different places, and, there are a lot of English teachers around the world. Do you think it's important, for example, talking about passion, the teacher to be, active and energetic? Do you think that's important? Do you think that's not important? What do you think about it?
I think it's hard to tell, because honestly, sometimes I've worked at places where they want you to be a certain image, this is what you are, this is the type of teacher, and people know when you're being not real, you know what I mean? So it's
well,
I think it's good to be into what their passions are and connect with people. But if you're hey, we're gonna learn English and prepare for this test, and they're not excited, they know that that's not real, but I think if you always can connect with something they're into, for example, I have a lot of students that are musicians right now.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but in my group I have 5 musicians, and I just got an idea. I thought, oh wow, every month I'm going to feature a song. So we're gonna have, starting today, I'm gonna have a song. I guess starting next week, that they can listen to that month, and I'll teach phrasal verbs and expressions from that song. They can listen to it, practice their pronunciation, and ask me about it. And I just kind of can get to know them and say, what kind of music do you like? And we can kind of go from there. But that's kind of one way that I'm connecting with my students right now.
but you are in you're I mean you try to know them as well. I mean, like what they like. For example, you say,
Yeah.
I mean, they like music, so you just go like from that point. Because I mean, it's
Yeah.
important. I mean, the point is like to make them feel, like comfortable. Because I think like
Exactly.
most of the students, like I remember when I was working in different places in the past. They were like different groups. They were like different people over there, and like people they have like different interests. And like for example, someone just said a topic, and some of them they didn't like the topic. Others were like, "Oh, okay, I already know these." Like I mean, it's important to know them and to I mean to encourage them. Because most of the people I think when they want to learn a foreign language, they are really afraid. First of all, they come with that thing from the past, which is any language is difficult to learn, and they say like, no, that's kind of impossible. Like. I mean, actually, for example, I think like English is one of the easiest languages to learn in the world. I don't know what you think about it. I think in Spanish or Portuguese is kind of like a little bit more difficult, right?
Yeah, I've studied a few languages, and right now I'm feeling like Portuguese is one of the more easier languages that I've been learning. But I maybe that's just because I know I've studied several languages now. I don't know, but
So how many languages like have you studied or do you speak?
I've studied lots of languages and I've learned them in school. Like, Portuguese now. I learned Italian back in college, and I studied German, and I know a little Korean. But the thing is this. I always say, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And I haven't spoken Italian in a very long time. If I went to Italy or I talked to someone, I'd probably understand, but I'd be like, it would be hard. I'd have to work at it again, So yeah, I think learning English is different depending on your first language. If I help a German student, yeah, words and sentence structure is so similar. It's much easier than helping a Korean student.
Yeah, I mean, like that, something that you said is like, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah,
that's
so true.
That's it.
Oh
I mean,
my gosh.
Yeah, I think like, for example, kind of tell you, like, my mother tongue is Spanish. But, like, I can say like 90% of my day, it's in English. So,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, all the time I just like,
I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, like I have like some foreign friends here, and I hang out with them, so it's English. So
yeah.
Maybe sometimes when I found like people and they like kind of interested in classes, so they talk to me in Spanish, so I answer to them in Spanish. But like I would say like 90% of my day is in English. And sometimes, as coming, to the phrase that you say that if you don't use it, you lose it. Sometimes this is crazy because it's my mother tongue. I mean, this is my language, and sometimes I forget Spanish words. I mean, like I'm like,
oh, really?
Say this?
Well,
yeah, I mean, like,
yeah. Your brain is thinking in English.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I say like, wow. I mean, is this possible? Can I just forget my own language? And yeah, I mean, if you don't use it, you lose it. I mean, that's kind of an important phrase there. And well, Sally, I think like finally, like just to help a little bit, the students is like, what kind of things do you recommend, like for beginners? Like for beginners and for people who already started already. I mean, like for example, people with like 000 English. What's kind of like the first advice you would give to them?
You're saying what's the best advice to give to beginner level students?
Yeah, like for example, they don't know anything about English, like nothing.
Okay. I recommend first, if your goal is to communicate, if your goal is to have conversational English, this is the approach I'm going to give you. If your goal is to prepare for a test, that's different. Yeah. That's different. So this is your goal if you want to speak naturally in conversation. I have a book, actually an ebook, where I have over 800 idioms, phrases, and expressions that are most commonly used. So like greetings, how to get around at the store, like taking an Uber or Lyft or taxi or something, going to the doctor, things like that. If you can learn those phrases and expressions, that's going to be most helpful for you in the world when you go somewhere, right? So I recommend doing that, learning those, and also focusing on main verbs and nouns. The most common verbs and nouns you're going to hear in the language. Understand how to pronounce them, how to translate them into your first language. And then thirdly, focusing on your pronunciation of those words and phrases you're learning. So I recommend that for beginner level students. And I know it's important to learn grammar. You need to. But I think a lot of times people get so, it's our system, it's our education system that they get so cut off. Oh, this is grammatically correct. And I'll say, yes, it is, but no one says that. It follows the rules, but just not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, even, sometimes when I'm like over here, like around the city, and sometimes I just find like they're English teachers, like kind of like English teachers from a high school or school, and sometimes, like I'm with my foreigner friends, and they are telling me sometimes, but they are speaking this wrong because that's present simple, and they should use the rules, and that's present perfect. They should
do
this.
That's teacher talk. That's like, that's teacher talk. I don't agree with that because to me, honestly, what's correct is what is used. And see, when I make my content, I use a Corpus. So I use an online system sort of like Google. So I can see, I type into a word or a phrase, how frequently it's used in language. So if its frequency is only 40, then that's not very much. But if the frequency is like, 15,000 times this has been found in all different medias, like magazines, news, novels, there's many different sources, but if it comes up and it's common, then it's correct. It's people are using it, obviously. So
I don't argue with them. I'm just like, okay, yeah. Because like they are very, what is the word? They are very theoretical. Like they are like, okay, it has to be like this, and I'm like, okay. If you say so, that's okay. Because they are gonna give you 1,000 reasons why is not correct. I mean, like, but for example, like when I'm with my friends over here, and we just talk, and we use the word that's normally used. I mean, like. And I think like the most important point of any language is to communicate something. It doesn't matter, for example, at the beginning, if you doesn't know, like if you don't know the proper phrase. Like for example, babies. I mean, when they are babies, they don't say the correct long phrase. They just say like something like food, and you understand. He's hungry or something like that. I mean, I mean, the point is to use it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you maybe, because for example, beginner students, they are very afraid of speaking because they say, Andrew, I don't say this because maybe I mispronounced this, or maybe I said it wrong, or maybe, my pronunciation is bad, or maybe, what a shame. So that's another thing. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, for example, people when they want to, they try, but they are shy. So how do you encourage them?
That's a good question. I have students in my group that are shy, and they say, I'd rather send you private messages. So my WhatsApp group, they send me a voice recording just to me, and they feel more comfortable. But I try to encourage them to keep saying, you're safe in the group. No one in the group is trying to make anyone else feel stupid. And if there hasn't been any negativity yet, but if there was, and I saw one person kind of acting like a know-it-all, like trying to correct everyone, I would probably say something to him like, because as an English teacher, I'm sure you will agree, is that a lot of it really has to do with confidence and building students' confidence, because when you're doing something you're not sure of, no matter what it is, English or anything, we aren't fully confident. So I think it's just pushing them to know that it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's a big one too. Make mistakes, make them every day. Keep making them.
That's something that I try to encourage them. Like, for example, not only talking about languages, I think like in any area of our lives, like for example, everything is a process. And I think like, for example, every single one of us, we have to make certain number of mistakes. Let's suppose this. So this is the process. So we have to make this amount of mistakes to get them right. So, the slower you make the mistakes, the slower you're gonna learn, whatever, faster. But
that's a good point. Yeah.
The faster you make the mistakes, you're gonna learn.
You're gonna progress.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think I try to encourage all the people, when they come here and they're like, Andrew, but I don't know how to say this, man. Andrew, but I don't know how to pronounce this. Andrew. So I try to just do it. If you don't, I'm gonna be here. Just I'm gonna help you out. Don't worry. Just try to do it. I try to encourage them to speak no matter what. They are very worried about making mistakes, but making mistakes is one important thing.
Yeah.
They have to do it. I'm glad when they make mistakes, because if they don't make mistakes, they wouldn't have to be like learning English. They would be like speaking perfect English, So I think that's a very important point. The students, they have to make a lot of mistakes and try to feel confident just making those mistakes. So I try to create the environment. I try to make friends with them sometimes, and don't worry, come on, just do it, just speak it, and I just try to listen to them and correct them. Try to make them feel confident and comfortable, so they can just speak no matter if they are right or not. I think that's an important thing.
And I also like that you said that it goes to everything in life, because even us, if I watch the very first video I ever made 2 years ago, it's so bad. I did not know what I was doing, and it's interesting, because it's I still didn't let that fear keep me back. I could have been I'm so scared, what will people think, and not post my video, but I'm you know what, I don't care, I'm gonna post it. And then I did it again and again, and I'm sure in 1 or 2 years I'm gonna look back at my videos now and think, oh, you didn't really know what you were doing. You know what I mean? So life is a process. You're always improving, you're always getting better, and
exactly.
And it goes to everyone.
Even us as a teachers, we're humans. Everybody makes mistakes. That's part of life.
Exactly.
And the point is one of the things that I really admire in people is people who really keep trying. That's it. That's the thing. Whatever you want to achieve in life, you have to try. Keep trying. No matter if you fail, go back again and try. And you will get it. At some point, you will get it.
Exactly. And I think the world needs teachers like us telling people that, telling students, because our traditional education system, there's so much pressure to get A's on everything and to get into the best college, and there's so much pressure that it's just it's so overwhelming, I have my master's, but it took me a long time, it took me 5 years to finish, and that's okay. I failed a few times. I started one paper, and my professor was like, I think you need to change some things. So I had to work on it again and again and again. And like you said, I just kept going. I just kept pushing. And eventually, I made it, I finished.
You were saying, that's the thing, I try to share with my students too, they can. because the first time when they come to the classes, I'm like, Andrew, but you're speaking in English and I don't understand you. I'm like, they're kind of like afraid about it. So they block, they block themselves. I mean, there's, I mean, if you say you can, you're right, and if you say you can't, you're right.
You're right.
So it's a mindset. I think like that's what I try to share with my students. Like they really can achieve whatever they want in life. Like if it is a language, like learning a new language, or whatever their goal is. I think like that's something that I really like to share with them. And so just try to encourage them to make mistakes, to feel free to make them, to feel confident when they make mistakes, and so they feel happy about it, and they just start making mistakes, and I try to be there and try to help and correct them sometimes, and eventually that mistakes just disappear, and and like suddenly they say like, Andrew, I'm speaking English. I'm like, yeah, man, you're doing it. I think that's something important, and I don't want to be like like, because it's your time. So finally, and for people who already know like English, what is your advice for them to continue practicing? Like what they should do? Like I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have, like I said, most of my students are at an intermediate level, or that's the level that works best because they have to understand 80 to 90% of what I'm saying. So with those students, if you're on an intermediate level or an intermediate to advanced, I recommend reviewing what you learn, because so often in our education system, we prepare, so we have to cram for tests. So we're in this mindset that we have to learn very quickly. And our brain doesn't work like that. Our brain works at a slow consistency. So I try to tell students, try to make a system of consistency that works for you. So over the course of 1 year or 2 years, you can see yourself improve. Don't stress to the day to day. Like today, oh my gosh, I don't think I learned